Welcome to week 4 of Design 224 CAD Certification at Ivy Tech Community College. And in this video, we're going to be working through our week 4 homework, which is going to be AutoCAD and its applications prep exam. And we're going to be working through 6 parts of this total over the next couple of class sessions. We'll be doing parts 1 and 2 this week. Then we'll be working on it for a couple more weeks until we have all 6 pieces completed. Now, parts 1 and part 2 are really more multiple choice. So remember that the actual test is a lot of practical questions where you actually have to take a file and modify it. And then the other part of the actual certification exam is multiple choice questions. So we haven't done very many, if any, of the multiple choice format questions to this point. Everything that we've been working on is make a drawing or modify a drawing and look up coordinates or look up distances or areas and then key in those numbers. So that is part of the actual certification exam. The other part of the certification exam is multiple choice questions. So the multiple choice questions are nice because if you know the answer, you can get through them really quick. But there is still some tips and tricks you want to know as you go through the multiple choice exams that are a little bit different from the practical questions. So this week we're going to be looking at some multiple choice questions, both together with questions 1 through 15. And then for your homework this week, you're going to finish this portion of the exam, which is part 2 of 6. So you will do questions 16 through 30 for your homework this week, and which is more multiple choice questions that you can practice on your own. So in this video, we're going to work through questions 1 through 15, and I'll give you some tips and tricks for working on these multiple choice questions and show you some test strategies that you can use to try and get these questions correct if you're not sure about the answer. So I'm going to go ahead and jump into questions 1 through 15. And you can attempt this as many times as you wish, and it will tell you your score when you're done. It just won't tell you what the right answers are. So if you don't get a perfect score, you can go back and try it again always. So let's go ahead and jump into it here. And we've got 15 questions. So some of these I'll actually prove to you why they're right or wrong. Some of them will just explain why that's the specific answer. So I try to show you a process here of looking up answers or proving answers in AutoCAD. So here they say, in the figure below, the circle is tangent to the square on all 4 sides. Which of the following object snaps can you use to select point A accurately? Select all that apply. So we're trying to say, okay, if I use my O snap, which point can I use to lock onto this particular coordinate? And then they give you a list of all different types of O snaps, and you can check one or more of them. So there are questions like this where they don't tell you how many correct answers there are, you just have to go through and choose them all. So in this case, what you could do, if you know a lot about O snaps, you could probably go through here and get a good idea of which ones work and which ones don't. If you're not familiar with your O snaps, here's what you could do. If you Alt-Tab back to AutoCAD, you can actually create a similar drawing to this and test the different answer choices and see which ones work and which ones don't. So this is a strategy that I use on a lot of questions when I take the test to figure out questions that I don't know. Because believe it or not, I don't know the answer to every question when I take the test. So I'm just going to draw a circle here of some size. It doesn't really matter. We're just testing O snaps here. And I'm just going to draw a square that's tangent around it, just like they described. Okay, and at this point, you can go in and sort of test your O snaps one at a time and see which ones are going to work here and which ones don't. Now, obviously, there are some that are not going to work here. Endpoint is not going to work because there's no endpoint of a line right here. Midpoint, we would expect that one to work because it would be the middle of this top line. So that we could look at as an answer. Center, again, there's the center of nothing right there, so that's not going to work. Quadrant will definitely work because we have the quadrant point for that circle. And we would expect intersection to work also because we have the intersection of a circle and a line there. So that might be one that I want to test also. Tangent, we would expect that one to work. So basically what you can do is go through and test these, and if you're not sure or you don't understand how a particular one of these O snaps works, then you could try it and see whether or not it does or doesn't work. So let's say you're not very familiar with the nearest O snap. So I'm going to go in here and turn these other ones off and turn on nearest, and then you can try to draw another object and see if it'll lock onto that. So nearest is the one that basically lets you choose any point on that line, but it's not going to lock into the exact point that we want. So then at this point you would know, okay, nearest is not one of the answers. Where I could go back in here also and try, for instance, quadrant. I would expect quadrant to work, so let's try that. And there you can see that I can lock on exactly to that point with quadrant. So on this question like this, I would use a trial and error method to figure out some of the ones that you don't know. And then once you're familiar with all of them, you can come back and put them in here. So in this particular case, the ones that would work, endpoint will not, extension will not, center will not, insertion does not work, intersection would, because I have the intersection of these 2 points, midpoint also would work, nearest does not, node does not work, parallel doesn't, perpendicular wouldn't, quadrant would, and tangent would. So that way you can kind of go through and try these. If you're not sure about one of these or you don't understand why, turn it on and try to snap onto that point, and you'll see that it does or doesn't work depending on which one you're trying. So going on to question 2. This is one that kind of tests your familiarity with where you can turn things on or off in AutoCAD. So they say, from which of the following screen elements can you change the current workspace? Select all that apply. Application menu, command line, quick access toolbar, ribbon, and status bar. Now right off the bat, I'll tell you, and I'll show you why, but I will tell you that anytime you see the command line listed as an option of a way to maybe do something, it's a safe bet if you're not sure to go ahead and check it, because I have yet to see any command in AutoCAD that you can't run through the command line. So if you're not sure, they're asking you whether or not you can do something through the command line, it's a safe assumption to assume that anything can be done through the command line. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and check that, but I'll show you why. So what is a current workspace? So if I go back to AutoCAD, here's what they're talking about. Up here on my quick access toolbar, I have this thing that says workspace. And most of the time it's set on drafting and annotation, which is what you're used to seeing when you use AutoCAD. If I drop this down, I can also change it to 3D Basics, which is a 3D modeling environment for AutoCAD that most people don't know is here. So you can actually 3D model in AutoCAD. And then they have a 3D modeling menu that's basically like 3D modeling on steroids. So it's any kind of 3D modeling command you would ever want. So it's sort of like beginning 3D modeling and advanced. But these are your workspaces, and you can switch between them up here. And this is called the Quick Access Toolbar. And if you're not seeing this, you can drop down this little thing. It looks like an eject button or a down arrow, and you can turn on different sets here. So if you're not seeing that, chances are your workspace is turned off right there. So you can drop this down and turn on workspace. So this is your quick access toolbar, and yes, we can change the current workspace here through this drop down menu. So that would be one of our correct answer choices. And you can see as I choose that, it changes all my tools up at the top. So I'm going to go back to our test, and I'm going to choose the quick access toolbar because that is an answer. The application menu, menu is, remember, the big red A up in the corner. So if I go up there, there is nothing up here where I can change that same setting. So drawing utilities would be the best place to look, but there's no setting there to change my current workspace. So that would not be an answer. And here, remember, they're saying select all that apply. So there's a lot of questions like this where you have to know all the choices, not just one. The command line, if I was guessing, I would say I could probably type in workspace and change my current workspace in the command line. So let's try that. Okay, and what do you know? There you get an option there for set current or change, so drafting and annotation. So it's kind of an old, ugly way of doing the same thing that we were doing up here, but you're doing it through the command line. So like I said, pretty much anything can be done through the command line in AutoCAD if you know the right command. So yes, we can change the current workspace through the command line. The ribbon, not necessarily. If we look at the ribbon they're talking about right here. So the ribbon is actually a function of the workspace. So I can't change the workspace through the ribbon because actually the workspace is the ribbon. It's sort of the same thing. So there's nothing up here that I can hit to change the appearance of this ribbon or this workspace. And then finally, the last choice that they give us is status bar. And this is the one that would probably get you on the test. It's a little bit harder to find. And this one is an answer. Your status bar is down here. And if I go to this little gear tool right here, I have a thing that says workspace switching. So if you're not sure what these are, it's a good idea to hover over them and see what they do and what the names of them are. But this little gear does essentially the same thing as our quick access toolbar drop-down menu up at the top. So I can switch between the same three things down here as I can up at the top. So in AutoCAD, there's usually 3 or 4 ways to do everything. And here are the 3 that you can use to change your current workspace. So you can either type it in on the command line, you can use the quick access toolbar, or you can come down here to the status bar. Any of those 3 will do the same thing. Okay, then moving on to question 3, they say which command can most efficiently create holes the same size as hole A at points 1, 2, 3, and 4. Select the one item that best answers the question. So on this one, a lot of people would see this and they would think, well, I would do an array for that. But looking at your other options here, array would not necessarily be a good idea because I have no pattern here. These holes are sort of sporadically placed around this drawing, so you couldn't really use an array to create these even though you have 5 holes. The circle command would work, but you'd have to redraw them all separately. So you could do it with the circle command, probably easier than the array command. Copy would really be your best choice here because you could draw one and then drop it on the 4 other locations all at the same time. Ellipse would be completely useless to you since you're drawing circles, and sphere would be useless to you because that's a 3D command. So really here you're kind of stuck between your top 3 choices. Array doesn't necessarily do what you want, circle is rather slow, and copy would be the fastest. So in this case you would say copy is the answer, choice C. So moving on to question 4, which of the following commands can you use to find the exact coordinates of a specific point in a drawing? Select all that apply. So on these questions where they say select all that apply, these are the ones where you probably want to go through and test every single choice unless you're positive you know what it does. So in this case, I'm not incredibly familiar with some of these different commands. So I am familiar with the list command, the ID command, and the distance command. These 2 I'm not terribly familiar with as far as going through the command line. So what I would do on this one is just try it. So I'm going to go back to AutoCAD and I'm just going to draw a point. So if I type in point in the command line, it'll say specify a point. So I'll click right there and you can see I've made it 1 point in space right there. And now I can go through and just start testing these options to see which one is right and which one doesn't work. So going through this, the first one they gave us was DB list. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and select this thing and then go to DB list just by typing it in. And there you can see it gives me the coordinates of that point. So in this case, it's at 19.6235 for the X and 7.4555 for the Y. So they don't want you to give the coordinates on this one, but yes, I can use DB list to find coordinates. So that one would be a yes. The second one they gave me was the distance command. So if I go to DIST and hit enter, this is not one of the answers. The distance command is one that will let you measure between 2 points. So for instance, I could measure from here to here, and it will tell me the distance between those 2 points, but it doesn't actually tell me the coordinates. It just tells me the change in distance. So that one is a no. Our third one is the ID command, and hopefully at this point you know that the ID command would be a yes. I can select something, type in ID, hit that point, and it will tell me the XY coordinates for that point. So ID at this point should be the one that you definitely know. List is our next one, and list is sort of similar to the ID command. So if I select that and go to list, then again you would have your XY coordinates in here, here, and here. So yes, you can find it through the list command also. And then finally they give us measure geom, so which is short for measure geometry. So if I type in that command and we look at the options here, I have an option for distance, radius, angle, area, and volume, but nowhere does it give me the option for XY coordinates. So that one would be a no. So going back to key in our answers, we said DB list was a yes, distance was a no, ID and list were both yeses, and this last one, measure geometry, was a no. So going down to question 5, we're looking at the fillet tool now. Which option of the fillet command would you use to create a fillet radius but leave the original lines in place? Select the one item that best answers the question. So if you're familiar with the fillet tool, you'll know that multiple would let you fillet multiple corners at the same time, such as a rectangle. So for instance, if I look at my rectangle here and I go to fillet, I can go to multiple. Oops, probably ought to put a radius in there first. So let's go to fillet. Let's put in a radius of 1 maybe. Go to multiple. And you'll notice that it keeps going, and I can choose multiple corners, or you can also, if you have a polyline, you can fillet them all at the same time. So multiple lets me put in more than one, but it doesn't necessarily let me leave these lines that would go here and here after I fillet that. So that would be a no on that one. So I'm going to undo. We have the option for no trim, which would make sense, and that is the answer, and I'll show you why. Polyline would not make sense. That would be for filleting polylines. Radius, you saw me just use. That's for setting the size of the fillet. So at that point, we're down to trim or no trim. So if you're not sure, you could test them. So I'm going to go back into the fillet command and show you how these work. So if I go to the fillet command, you can see an option down here for trim. So if I pick trim, right now you can see my current setting here. So mine is currently set on trim, which is why when I created these fillets, you saw that it trimmed off the extension lines and rounded it out with a fillet. So if I switch to no trim, this is sort of the other option. So if I click this line and this line, oops, and we're still set on multiple here. Let's go back. Actually, let's just draw a couple lines here to make it easy. And we'll put my O snaps back like I had them. Okay, so if I draw a couple lines, go to fillet, radius we're going to set on 1, and the trim I'm going to switch to no trim, and then fillet the 2 lines. You can see how this is different than what you're probably used to. Normally when you fillet something in AutoCAD, it's set to the trim option and it trims off these 2 lines. But you can go in to the trim menu and set it to no trim, where it will actually leave these behind, which is what the question is asking about. So the answer on that one is no trim. So if I go back, I can choose that, and that would leave the original lines in place. All right, now on question 6, they say all of the angles in the figure below are equal. What increment angle would you specify in the polar tracking tab of the drafting settings dialog box to create these angles accurately using polar tracking? So in other words, what setting would you put your polar tracking on to draw this thing? And if we know we have a circle cut up evenly into 6 slices, that would tell us that each one of these is 60 degrees, since we have 360 degrees all the way around. So in order to draw a 60-degree line, I have to have some multiple of 60 degrees set in my polar tracking. So 22.5 would not work because I wouldn't end up with a multiple of 60. 30 would, because I could go in between here and then also on each one of these slices. So I could actually cut this up into 12 pieces using this setting if I wanted, but definitely 6. 45 would not work because I would actually be 15 degrees off of this. And 90 would not work because I would only be able to snap to every 4 coordinates or every 4 quadrants of this. So in this case, your answer would be B, 30 degrees. And if you want, you could actually go back to AutoCAD and test it. So if I take this circle that I already drew from the previous question where I was testing something else, I can just reuse it. So if I set on 30 degrees here, you can try and draw this using your O snaps. And you can see that if I go every 30 degrees, I can lock in to my 60-degree angles that I want. So this is an example of, if you're not sure, go into AutoCAD and try it and see what happens. And then you can prove, yes, that is definitely the answer of 30 degrees. If you try it on the other settings, it won't work, and you'll figure out pretty quickly what happens. If I try, for instance, 45, if I try to draw the same thing with 45 degrees, I can get the first line in there, but when I go here, I'm actually supposed to be snapped up to here, so I'm already 15 degrees off. Then when I try to come over here, you end up with slices that aren't the right size because each one of these is 15 degrees too small. So 45 doesn't work, and you can try the other ones to disprove them as well. But the answer on that one is 30. So going down, which of the following operations can be performed using grips? Select all that apply. So they have array, explode, mirror, and offset. And this is a lesser known trick inside AutoCAD. So I'll show you something here that most people don't know or use because it's not terribly useful. But for instance, if I select one of these lines that I used earlier. So I'll just kind of clean up what I've got here. If I select this line that I drew earlier and click on it, you can see I have 3 grips. I have the ones on the end and the one in the middle. Now if I click on the ones on the end or hover over them, I get 2 options of stretch and lengthen. Now neither of those were options for our question, but if I click on the middle one and select it and then hit enter, you'll notice right now at the bottom of my command line down here it says stretch. But if I just hit enter without moving my mouse, you can see it actually cycles through different options here. So if I hit enter without doing anything, it goes from stretch to move. Hit it again, it goes to rotate, scale, mirror, and then back to stretch. So this is what they're asking you, and most people don't know you can do this with the grips in AutoCAD. Most people know that if you take this thing and you click on it, you can move it around. But what they don't know is if you hit enter, you can go to the move command or rotate or scale, mirror, stretch, all inside there from that grip. So going back, array was not one of our options, explode was not an option, mirror was, so I'll choose that, offset was not. So that's a good trick that you can use, and also something that can be useful actually when you're creating drawings. Just choose that grip and start hitting enter, and you can actually cycle through a bunch of choices. All right, so we're switching to a dimension question now. They like to give you multiple choice questions about dimensions because they're easy to find and quick to answer. So they say here, which units can you use to display dimensions in the format 2 point blah 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 e to the first power. So select all that apply. So if you have taken a chemistry class before or a physics class or an engineering class, you probably know that this is scientific notation. So if you're familiar with scientific notation, you would probably check that and move on. But it's a good idea to check some of these other ones. If you're not familiar with engineering or decimal formats, you might want to check them just to be sure, because this is a select all question. So be careful on the select all questions. It's a good idea to test all the answers so that one of them doesn't sneak up on you and make you get the question wrong. So to check this, if you go to AutoCAD, you can go to your Dimension Style Manager. You can either get to that by typing Dim Style on your keyboard, or you can go to Annotate on your ribbon tabs and then click this little tiny drop-down button right here and get to the exact same menu. So if I go into Modify, I can modify my dimension style, and they're asking us a question about tolerances. So if I go to Tolerances, they're talking about this box right here, which is the method. Or sorry, we're asking about units. I'm in the wrong box. So if I go to Units, unit format is decimal, so here's what they're asking us. So I can change the different types here. So basically what I would do is try these different ones and see if any of them over here pop up like what was in our test. So if I go to Scientific, that you can see is giving you the same type of appearance that you're seeing on the test, the number with the E and then the exponent. And you can try the other ones, although in this case Scientific is the only one that looks like that. So you can go through and try them all and say yes, no, until you find the one you're looking for. So in this case, if I back out, the answer on this one is Scientific, and that's the only answer. So going on to question 9, which command can you use to create a new text style named Romans that uses the Roman simplex font? Select the one item that best answers the question. So this is a little bit easier because if I find the one command that does this, then I know I'm done and I can move on. So you don't have to go through and test every single one of these. Once you find the one that will do the job, you know you have the answer, and the other ones have to be wrong. So looking through this, I'm not terribly familiar with some of these, but looking at this, ones I probably would want to try first would be style or text maybe. ML style, I'm not sure, so let's try that. I'm not terribly familiar with all these keyboard commands, so I'll just try it. And this brings up multi-line style. Okay, so we're not dealing with text there. So that's the shortcut for multi-line style. So we know that's not it. They gave us scale list edit. So let's try that one. Okay, so this is where I can set up my drawing scales for scaling my drawings up or down. So again, that has nothing to do with creating a new text style. So it's not that one. And here, if I go to style, let's try that. So I'll put in style. And here we get text styles, where I can make text styles. So that would be the correct answer. I could put my font in here and set up the height. So the answer on that one is style. If we try the other two, one they gave us was text, which this is basically the keyboard shortcut for making single line text. So this will put text into a drawing, but it won't change the style of it. It just lets you type it in. Okay. So that's the text command. And then if I go to text edit, which I believe was the other one, we know this one's wrong because we already found the answer, but just to disprove it, if I pick this, then that will let me take that text and edit it and change anything I want about it. So the answer on this one would be style. Moving on to question 10. Which of the following objects can be joined using the join command even if there are gaps between them? Select all that apply. Now this is one that I would not be comfortable with just picking and guessing. So this is one where I would slow down and quickly try to test all these options. So you don't want to spend 20 minutes drawing all this stuff, but try to find a way to quickly test these things. So 2 collinear lines, a line and a polyline, 2 arcs on the same imaginary circle, 2 elliptical arcs on the same ellipse, a polyline and an arc, and 2 polylines. So I'm going to start by testing 2 lines and a line and a polyline and see if I can join them. So I'm just going to clear out everything I've got here. So I'm going to go to home, quickly draw 2 collinear lines with a gap between them, and then I'm going to draw a line and a polyline. So there's one line, this is a polyline. Okay, now I'm going to try and join them. So if I go to the join command, I'll pick the first one, hit enter, pick the second one to join to it, hit enter. Okay, and that one worked. So I can join 2 collinear lines with a gap between them. Now let's try a line and a polyline. So I'll go to join, pick the line, enter, pick the polyline, and there we can see it won't even let me pick it, so that one's a no. Okay, so the first one's a yes, the second one's a no. Now we're going to do 2 arcs on the same circle and 2 elliptical arcs on the same ellipse. So here's a quick way you can draw this. I'm going to just draw a circle, size doesn't matter, and I'm going to draw an ellipse using my ellipse command. Size and method don't really matter. Okay, so there's an ellipse and a circle, and I'm going to draw some lines through them. It doesn't really matter where, just cut it up into a couple of pieces. And then to speed things up, I'm just going to take this and copy and paste it over so I don't have to do it again. Now take your trim command and trim this out to where you have 2 arcs on each piece. Delete all the lines. And now I quickly know that I have 2 arcs that share a center point of a circle and 2 arcs that share a center point of an ellipse, but I don't have to draw them or try to match them up. So just draw one and trim it out. Now I can try and join them. So if I go to the join command, I'll pick this one, hit enter, pick the second one, hit enter. And so yes, that one does work. I can do 2 arcs on the same circle. Let's try 2 arcs on the same ellipse. So I'll go to join, pick that one, hit enter, pick the second one, hit enter, and yes, that one also works. So both of those are yeses. And you wouldn't think that on this one. It sounds confusing and like it wouldn't work, but it does. So test it and make sure. A polyline and an arc, and then 2 polylines, and then we're done. So I'm just going to draw an arc up here with my arc tool, and then I'll draw a polyline away from that, and then 2 polylines. So I'll draw a polyline here, put a gap in between, and draw another one. So I'll go to join, pick the arc, pick the polyline. You can see it doesn't like these polylines. It's not going to let me join those. So I'll try it one last time down here. Okay, and that one doesn't work either. So those would both be no's. So in that case, those are our 3 answers. The other ones don't work. And if you're not sure, you can go through and test it. And we only spent a couple of minutes on that question, but we can guarantee that it's right now. So now we can move on. So what key combination allows you to cycle quickly through all the currently open drawings in sequence? Select the one item that best answers the question. So they give us a bunch of choices here for keyboard shortcuts, and when they say cycle through the open drawings, they're saying if you have 3 or 4 files open at the same time, how can I jump from one to the next? Now, I don't know off the top of my head which one of these is right, but this is another question where I can go through and just figure it out really quick because I know there's one answer. So in AutoCAD, I'll just set up a little test scenario here by opening up 2 or 3 drawings. I don't even have to put anything in them. I just need to have 3 files open. Now I can start checking these to see which ones work. So if I do a Control Shift, Control F4, or Control F6. So here I'm going to try Control Shift. That does nothing. Control F4. That looks like it closed my drawing. And then Control F6. I can see that's actually toggling between both of my drawings up at the top for drawing 1 and drawing 2. So I'm going to open up a third one just to be safe and check it again. So if I hit Control F6, there you can see it's jumping between my drawing tabs. So that's the correct answer. So I'll go back. Control F6 is the answer. There's no reason to test these two because I know this is the right answer. If you wanted to, you could though. But I'm going to go ahead and pick that one and move on to question 12. Okay, so in question 12, we have another question here about dimensions and tolerances. And they say, which AutoCAD tolerance method would you use to display the dimensions shown below? Select the one item that best answers the question. So this is another one of those questions where if we find the right answer, we can move on. We don't have to worry about checking every single case. So there's one right answer here. So anytime you see a question about dimensions and they're asking you about settings, it's probably going to be in the dim style menu. So they're asking me about tolerances here. So I'm going to jump over to AutoCAD and find the tolerancing method that looks like this. And I know it's probably going to be one of these settings, if any of them. It might be none. So I'm going to go ahead and close out these other drawings that I made to test the last question. And I'm going to go to Annotate and then hit the button for my Dimension Style Manager and go to Modify and then our Tolerances section over here. So I'm going to click the Tolerances tab and we want to find the method that matches the picture they showed us in the test. So if I start with symmetrical, you can see that matches what they show me on the test where I have a plus minus dimension for my tolerance. I could also try deviation where they put the upper and lower limits. So a similar way of showing a tolerance, but not the one they showed. Limits, you just show the maximum and minimum size, so that would not be the right answer. And then basic would not be the right size either. So here we can see symmetrical matches the answer that they show on the test. So I'm going to go back and choose symmetrical, and I know that that's the right answer because it matches the format here. So moving on to 13, which command allows you to save a collection of settings for displaying dimensions? Select the one item that best answers the question. And at this point, we've used this menu a number of times already, and that would be the dim style menu. So hopefully from the last several questions we've done, you've seen how all of my dimension settings are controlled by dim style. Now, if you wanted, you could go in and try some of these other ones, dim edit, dim override, dim t edit, which is dimension text edit, or dim constraint. So these are really more particular settings for specific cases on how to change the way that dimensions appear. But the big overarching, overriding menu for changing all your dimension settings is your dim style menu. So anyone that's used AutoCAD for an extended period of time should know about the dimension style menu and what it's for. So if you don't, you really need to get familiar with dim style before you take the actual test. So that is the correct answer on that one. So question 14, which command selects all objects in a drawing that match certain properties of a selected object? Select the one item that best answers the question. So we have one answer here again. So in this case, they're saying if I have an object selected, such as a line, which of these commands will select other similar objects? So it would make sense that just by the name of these, it would be this one. You can try some of the other ones too, but I'm going to go ahead and try this one because it seems to make the most sense that if I'm selecting objects that have a matching properties or similar properties, that it would be select similar. So I'm going to go back to AutoCAD and I've got a couple of lines here, or you could also just grab your line tool and draw some different lines in this drawing. So these are all going to have similar properties because they're all just lines that I've drawn. So if I pick one of them and then try select similar, you can see how it works as the question describes. It selects all of the other ones to go along with it. So that would be the correct answer. You could try some of the other ones also if you want to try select or add selected or set variable or set by layer. So this is a command that controls layer settings. This one controls variables. I'm not convinced that this is even an AutoCAD command. I'm not familiar with that one. Let's try choosing one here, and then if we say select, okay, it just tells you how many objects you have selected. So the select command basically looks at how many objects I have selected, and it will tell you then. So not a very useful command, but it is a command in AutoCAD, but it doesn't do what they're asking for. So select is not a correct answer either, and that's why. Okay, so moving on to our last question for this video, we're going to be looking at question 15. Which O-snaps would you use to move the circle shown below so that the center of the circle is exactly at point A? So to grab onto the center of the circle, I would be using a center O-snap. So I know right off the bat I'm at one of these two, okay? And they say select all here, so we could possibly have more than one answer. Quadrant would not work because quadrant is going to snap to basically the four outer edges of this circle. So quadrant is out. Midpoint is out because I don't have a line here, I have a circle, so I can't find the midpoint of the circle. That would be the center O-snap, so that's out. And perpendicular is out because there's nothing perpendicular about this circle. So at that point I'm down to these first two as an option. I've ruled out the other four already. So center endpoint, well, center would work here, but endpoint isn't going to work here because the only place I have endpoints are at the corners. So if I was to drop the center of the circle on one of these corners, that would be fine, but I'm trying to put it over here, so that's not going to work. So at that point, my last option is center intersection, which would work because I have the center of the circle and I'm dropping it on the intersection of these two lines. And if you wanted to go through and test this, this is another one of those questions that you could actually draw these objects and test it and turn on these two O-snaps and see which one works. So for instance, if I draw this and turn on center and intersection, let's clear all this stuff out. I'll just delete it all. So I'm just going to draw a circle and then two squares like they showed. And then for my O-snaps, I'm going to turn on center and intersection and see, can I do what they're describing? So if I select here, I'm going to go to my move command, pick the center of my circle, and then you can see here, there's an intersection and there's an intersection. So try it, see if it works. It does. And the other ones, if you try them, you'll see that they don't work. So you can go through and test these also. Okay, so that's the end of this first test, or the first part of this test. So we get some practice there with multiple choice questions, and these are usually quicker. And if you know the answer, you can put it in. If not, you can use this process of trying it in AutoCAD and see, can you figure out the answer. So we've gone through 15 of them to kind of give you the idea of the strategy that I use when I take the test. So I'll go ahead and hit save and submit to turn in my answers. And hit OK. And then it should give us the results. So here you can see I got a 15 out of 15. So I got them all right. But if you missed one, you can go through and it will tell you if you missed one, which one it was, and you can go back and try it again. So hopefully this gives you some practice with the multiple choice questions and kind of the process for completing them. So remember, your assignment for this week is to go ahead and try the next 15 questions on your own, which is questions 16 through 30, which makes up part 2 of 6 for this particular exam. Now parts 3 through 6 will actually be more practical, so it'll go back to kind of the format of modifying and creating files that we've been looking at for the first couple of weeks. So we'll do one more set of practice questions, and remember, next week in the answer key, I'll give you the answers to all these questions and we'll work through them together in the video answer key. So try them on your own this week, see how well you do, and then next week I'll release the answers to you in a separate video. So your homework for this week is complete 16 through 30 on your own and see what kind of score you can get. So that's it for this video. If you have any questions, you can email me at jhamilton83@ivtech.edu. Or if you're near the Indianapolis campus, you can stop by room T316 of the Glick Technology Building, which is my office, and I'll be happy to help you with anything if I can. So that's it for this video. Give it a try on your own now. Good luck, and I'll see you in the next video.